Last week, the Seattle Seahawks allowed their very talented, very productive running back Kenneth Walker to go in free agency, signing the biggest free agent contract for a running back in NFL history. This left a lot of Seattle Seahawks fans shocked, quite frankly, and a little perturbed, as Kenneth Walker has been a very talented and productive back for the Seattle Seahawks throughout his time here in Seattle, and he was also coming off maybe his best string of performances in the playoffs when you needed him most, capping it off with a Super Bowl MVP. It would seem to almost be a no-brainer to bring him back. He's only 25 years old. He really looks like he was really taking to this outside zone system. So why wouldn't you want to keep the band back together? Why wouldn't you want to try to keep as many players in tow to try to go back next year and repeat? Well, if I can, let me try to bring a little bit of sunlight here to this situation as to why John arrived where he did and why he seemed to be somewhat okay and at peace with just letting Walker go. He didn't try to get into a bidding war with Kansas City. He just said, go get your price. If it's over what we're willing to pay, we're just going to let you walk. And that's what they did. I think this does come down to two specific points as to why John was willing to let this happen. It comes down to first value and history. Now, first, when we come to the value, Walker is now the fourth highest paid running back in the National Football League. And he has earned that contract for the performances he has put up. But nonetheless, that is a pricey sum to be paying for a running back. And we know with running backs, when you do tend to pay them in NFL history, even our time here in Seattle, that hasn't worked out well. But Walker, with the value he provides, is he worth that? Now, as a runner, probably so. There's no more dynamic running back in this sport than Walker. There's no player in this sport more capable of breaking tackles in open spaces than him. No doubt about that. How he totes the rock, well worth the price. But as a running back, you do more things than just simply run the ball. You have to pass catch, and you got to pass protect at times. Now, as a pass catcher, I think Walker has been a little bit underrated at times in this area of things because when he came out, it was thought that he couldn't do it at all out of Michigan State, that he'd be a little bit of a negative in that area. I don't think he's been a pure negative, but I also think that he's probably been around average in that area of things. I think this is important because when you look at a couple of the other running backs highly paid around where he's at in the sport, Christian McCaffrey or Saquon Barkley, I think they're a little bit more dynamic out of the backfield, what they do as pass catchers, thus increasing their value just a little bit. Then you've got pass protection. And this is where there's a little bit of a stickiness when it comes to Walker. Because part of the reason that Charbonnet is able to overtake some of those carries and you were to try to kind of keep the game balanced between those two, between the number of targets, touches, just the number of plays that they're out in the football field, had to do with the team's confidence in Charbonnet to hold up in pass protection situations much better than Walker. You can find a good collection of some brutal snaps of Walker over the last couple of years when you've got him in pass protection, when he's got to pick up a blitzer, when he's got to do a little bit of a chip. It's just not really a strength of his game. So you have a guy average at pass catching, definitely a little bit of a negative when it comes to pass protection, yet dynamic as hell when it comes to running the rock, yet you're paying top-end market prices. You're paying prices like you're getting the full meal deal player without any negatives. And that's just not quite what you're getting here with Walker when it comes to actually down to the value and what he's being paid, which is a nice tidy sum. The second very important reason for why you let Walker go in this situation comes down to history. One of the things that makes John Schneider such a brilliant general manager in this sport is his willingness to adapt, change, evolve. He's not going to remain stagnant. He's not going to say the way that I did it in 2014 is the way that I now need to do it here in 2026. He's going to look at his history and he's going to change with the times. An example of this would be their approach to the draft. Over the last 3 years, the Seattle Seahawks have made a titanic shift in their approach from what they did in 2016 and 17 and 18 to really leaning into value in the draft. Who is the highest valued guy we've got on our board? That's who we're going to pick when we select, especially in day one and day two. And when you look back in 15, 16, 17, and 18, there was much more of a reaching for need, a reaching to fill a hole on the roster. John realized that wasn't working and he changed it up. Likewise, when it comes to the running back position, when John looks over his time here in Seattle and he looks at paying running backs, recently the data is not great. And when you specifically look at the last 10 years of paying running backs, it's an unmitigated disaster. First, you've got Marshon Lynch's third contract with the team. With this third contract with the team, you've got Marshon really pushing for it, John not really wanting to give it out. He knows Marshon's getting near the end of the road, and yet you're just trying to keep the band together, trying to keep the good times rolling, and so you do accommodate Marshon. Marshon ends up injured throughout that basically final year here in Seattle. Then he ends up pushing to go off to be part of the Raiders as he wants to do a swan song there in Oakland before they're going to be moved down to Vegas. John accommodates him, but then John's got to eat dead money to make that deal happen. You got the Chris Carson contract where you had to decide whether to pay him or not. You knew the neck was a little bit dodgy, yet you still gave him the contract. It blew up in your face. So the two biggest deals you gave out there with Marshon and Chris Carson were just not good at all. You got no returns from them. And then to the point of this, you gave out a lot of one-year deals throughout this last 10 years. One-year deals where you gave some significant money, but just hoping that the prove-it deals could get the most out of those running backs in that given year. Carlos Hyde, Eddie Lacy. You got even Rashad Penny coming off of his rookie contract, 1 year, $6 million. All of those deals blew up in John's face. He got almost no return from them. So over 10 years, he's got no successes in paying running backs big money at all. 1 year deal, multi-year deal, it's just not working. And so I think that this did inform him a lot on this situation, saying, okay, hasn't worked out for me paying running backs. I know in Kenneth Walker, I've got a guy that's not necessarily pristine when it comes to injuries, because though he was able to stay clean and healthy this year, that's not been the case through every other year of his time here in Seattle, where he's constantly getting beaten up. He's constantly dealing with some kind of nagging injury. He hasn't had the ACL necessarily per se, but there's always been something, especially as we get to the end of the year, where he just is kind of a bit of a shell of his former self by the end of the year. He gets worn down. And Seattle was able to mitigate that this year by splitting up the carries, pure and simple, splitting up the real literal snaps between him and Charbonnet throughout the course of this year. And it was part of what helped Walker to then be healthy at the end of the year so that he could have that brilliant performance in the playoffs. But that's also something John wants to take into account with Walker going into the future. Should I count on this 1 year of an outlier? And do I want to pay a running back that kind of money when I know I've got to split his carries, when I know I have to protect him in pass protection at times? From John's stance, he said, no, I can't do that. So when you look at this situation, the value, the track record of the history, the fact that the analytic folks tell you penny running backs is not really the smartest approach to go at here. You can get value from it. You can certainly have a star running back really go off for you. But if you really build up a real strong offensive line, if you put a grade A offensive system together, if you got the great coaching, if you got a quarterback that's going to be functional and able to keep the defenses honest, able to keep them at times in that cover two shell defense, if you have a defense that can keep those offenses off the field, that can keep those offenses from scoring constantly so you're not behind in football games so you don't have to pass constantly and then just do away with the running game entirely, not because it's being stopped, but because you're behind in the games. If you take care of all of those other factors, you can find solidity when it comes to running the football. You can find consistency with running the football, even if you don't have a difference-making running back in the backfield. So keep this in mind, Seattle Seahawks fans. It hurts to lose these kind of players. You're going to get a flip side on this on the compensatory system with getting some returns back down the line for losing Walker in this way. But I can't help but think a little bit of the Chiefs' approach here has been a bit of desperation for the position, a desperation to find a running back that can be better than what they've had there recently. They've taken first-round pick flyers on guys like Clyde Hilaire. That hasn't worked out as well. They've had middling results with Isaiah Pacheco. So this is a little bit of them trying to course correct to find that guy more than it is them being visionary in their approach. While John on the other side, in my opinion on this, is being visionary in his approach. He's not being reactive. He's not saying we got to keep the whole band back together just for the sake of it. He's saying, is it a smart decision or is it not? And when it comes down to this, making Kenneth Walker the fourth highest paid running back in the sport is just not a smart decision. My name is Brandon Kane. This is the Hawks Nest. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. But beyond all else, don't you ever forget, go Hawks.